What happens when a guy from the city accidentally contacts a guy from the country? It's not what you think. They strike up a conversation and same difference is created. JD and Kory talk the whole gamut of life as they each see it through the prism of race. One is a 6'4" black man and one is a 5'4" white man. Tune in and find out which is which. Agree or disagree, they will make you think, strike emotional chords, and more. Stick around. You might just learn something. Welcome to Same Difference with your hosts, JD and Kory. We're sharing our stories and how our stories impacted our approach to life. We take our perspectives into having dialogue about real life topics. Great day, Dr. Mass. It's been a little while, and it's good to see you, my friend.
It is good to be seen. It is cold outside here. Nice little snow on the ground. So, good to be seen.
This is episode 18. Adulthood is not what I dreamed it would be. Sounds like a winner to me. Before we get too far afield, let's shout out the people that make this happen. First of all, to VPR Radio, the goddess, Kiana, we couldn't do it without you, and the distinguished DJ FMI. Without that platform, we wouldn't be here providing you with these stories and insights into our lives. Thank you, folks. JD?
Absolutely. Thank you guys for listening, for participating, giving us feedback. We really appreciate that. And we are looking forward to sharing more and more stories, getting to know each other, as well as allowing you into our journey. So looking forward to this.
One of the comments that I've had that pops up pretty recently is that we're having conversations that sound like we're two guys at a neighborhood bar just talking over beer and wings. So I think we're doing something right.
Sounds good, or I sound drunk. So either way. Both could be true.
Yeah. Two things can be true at the same time. So start us off. Tell us something.
Well, I've made this statement before, but this is the years where you're kind of leaving, at least for me, and I saw it in other people. You're leaving what you were as a child and determining what part of that you want to bring with you, as well as what am I going to be as an adult. And you're figuring it out, and you're smart, and you're in school, and you're being told about portion of the world, and you think you got it all kind of figured out. And so a couple things going on in my life. On one hand, is that I was protecting my friends' entrepreneurial ways at different times, and yet I was also going through my journey to school with Topher every day, and we're trying to figure out entrepreneurial ideas, or we're figuring out what's wrong with the world, the approach and the systems, and starting to really look at the world from a systemic standpoint. And yet then I got my family life and still have a great relationship with my parents, and my dad and I play tennis regularly. And right before I went to St. Louis U, when I was still at Webster and playing tennis, we were playing tennis next to what we found out later was the tennis coach at St. Louis U. I went to U City. We didn't have much of a tennis program there. The coach for my first 3 years drop off the tennis balls, leave, come back 2 hours later going, great practice. And that was how he collected his little extra check. And so I had other teachers and on the side and did it on the side. And me and Shondo played a lot. And so I was good, but I was still 5'3" and not the swiftest of foot. And so I didn't think highly of myself as a tennis player. At Ohio State, I wouldn't have dared considered going into tennis, and nor would I, Webster didn't really have a tennis team. So it wasn't really on my radar until I'm playing next to this guy and he says, hey, tells my dad he should come out for the SLU tennis team. That's Division I. What am I going to do on the SLU tennis team? So when I got to SLU, I went out and I realized I actually ended up competing with one of the freshmen that they had given a scholarship to for the final kind of starting 6 roster spot, and almost made it, but got to play in a couple of tournaments. So I'm excited now, right? And I'm going home and I'm doing sit-ups every day and I'm doing push-ups every day. And what I don't know is that my lower back bone is not connected to the spinal column bone is not connected to the one above it. And so I'm doing these sit-ups and I am pushing one of the bones in and it's pulling on my spine. And before I know it, I'm feeling like, God, my back is hurting more and more each day. And I don't understand what's going on. And so I go to the trainer now. I'm an athlete. I get to go to the trainer's facility and they're just pulling and prodding at it and doing electrical shock treatments and things of that nature. And they haven't diagnosed shit. They're just taking my word that I think I pulled a back muscle or something. And my mother, being a doctor, said, no, if they're doing something and it hurts, they shouldn't be doing it. And so she took me to a doctor got me in to see a doctor. And I'll never forget the built-in racism of this doctor, white man. And he goes, what you have, or they get, no, first, let me take it back. She's a doctor. She can get me an x-ray. So she gets me an x-ray and she says, I think it's this, whatever this long spinal scoliosis kind of word it is. And she gets the x-ray and she's talking to her sister. She hasn't told me the results. And she goes, yeah, I thought it was this problem and it really is. And I go, oh, really, it is. So I go to see this doctor. He's looking at the x-ray. He goes, yeah, what you have is a common problem amongst shorter athletes. A lot of the gymnasts get it and, it's common. I said, oh, really? He was like, well, it's mostly common amongst white athletes, but that's all that matters, right? I went, damn, did you just feel comfortable enough saying that to me? And I said, oh, I got to get out of here. So then I said, so what do I need to do about this, doc? And he goes, just take some Advil and over the weekend. And if it still hurts on Monday, give me a call. I said, oh, no, we're not doing that because if you don't think that I've already been past the Advil stage and that's why I'm with you, I'm not giving you another billable hours. And I went out. My grandmother had taken me there. I said, I can't believe this guy said this. And I said it in his office so that everybody could hear that, white athletes were the only ones that mattered. And she said, we won't be coming back to see him, I'm sure. And I said, yep. And we went on to a different facility at St. Louis U. Well, I ended up walking around with like this big old plastic brace that you got to strap on and all of that, and really wanted surgery. I mean, after a while, I was begging the doctor, just operate on me. This is ridiculous. But while I'm injured, my tennis coach and I are talking, and he was telling me about his vision for these bubbles that could be built and then taken down during the summer. And we went and drove to Wichita, Kansas, and saw them in action. And we had this vision for having this opportunity to build these courts. And I had a little money from my grandfather and wanted to invest in a business. And, both of us, him being a Black man and he had made it through the semi-pro level, or even, into the professional rankings, but never, high enough to be, seen on TV or anything like that in some of the major Grand Slam events, but was a very talented tennis player nonetheless. And he wanted to teach. He was teaching other young students, and we both wanted to be able to reach inner city students. He had this wonderful idea. His name is Cameron Thomas, of getting portable nets and rackets and just going into schools and setting up in the schools and doing this. And so we wanted to build this idea. And I think maybe he thought I had more money, or he thought it would go a little differently. And we didn't, my first time trying to do a real company, and we got an old dental office a couple blocks away from my mother's house, and turned it into our little office and started hiring folks. And it was a strained business model to make money from, because you got to pay people by the hour, but really they set up and have to drive and have to, they can only do 3 hours worth of work, but it's going to take them 6 hours to do. And so all of these things working out in our head, it ended up not being as successful as I would like. But we formed a nonprofit. I got a tremendous amount of experience off of it. Formed a nonprofit, did a huge event. The St. Lunatics had a song on the radio. They were only St. Louis known at the time.
Yeah.
But they came and performed at this event for all these inner city youth organizations to come to. And we had different activities, and we had a judge come out and speak to them about, life and getting things together. And he had a great speech, and they weren't interested. They were just waiting on the St. Lunatics to come and show and do a song for them. And I just remember kind of going through that time of really wanting to do something business-wise that also gave back, and that really kept my interest in that.
So let me ask you a couple questions. First question: where were the tennis courts located throughout the city? Were they segregated, if you will, by economics?
So yes, I mean, almost any large park in St. Louis, and we got quite a few parks. Any large park would have had a tennis court in it, right? So given that the white flight was so big, a lot of these tennis courts were still in urban areas where Black folks were now living, and so you had that section. But yes, it was very segregated, other than, of course, U City, where Heman Park was the only place we knew that you could just go and pick up a game of tennis like you pick up a game of basketball, right? You just show up with the balls and your racket, and somebody else is going to be there. And hey, you want to play today? And the next day you're playing with someone else, and next day you're playing with someone else, and then you're teaming up for doubles. And every day was a new adventure at Heman Park. But for the most part, yes, it's a segregated city. It's a segregated experience, especially along the lines of tennis. And then you get into the country clubs during the winter, and you got to dress in a certain all white, and you got to kind of look in a certain all white too, if you know what I mean. And so there was a very uncomfortable setting for indoor tennis, as we called it, but basically country club kind of tennis and racket clubs and things of that nature.
Were the nets provided by the city, provided and maintained through the city for those public courts?
Maintained depending on the economic status of the municipality they were in. There were some courts that were turning into Wimbledon courts because there was so much cracks and grass growing up in them, and some courts were in much better shape. And depending on whether you had a community that really supported the courts would be whether or not that court could even have a investment in it from the city funds. On the other hand, that's part of what we did. We would go into unused courts that were at least good enough, and we would go into those municipalities and say, hey, can we start running programs for your community members? And you offer it through the city, and we be the facilitating teachers, and we'll provide the balls, we'll provide some cheap rackets if they need them, but we set up in a few different municipalities. We got access to their parks to utilize for our programs, and we didn't have to, pay money for the use of the courts that way.
What was the turnout like for the different municipalities?
We didn't. So there was one right next to U City is a town called Overland. Their police department is known as the Ku Klux Klan. But Overland is a less affluent white area. And we had a pretty decent turnout from them. Again, we're brand new, and this didn't last, but maybe a couple of years at most, the
Right.
company. And just mistakes being made, bad miscommunication amongst Cameron and myself. I was young, and I wasn't seeing how I was going to be able to turn a profit in the tennis world without having a much larger investment than I could afford. It didn't last as long as I would have liked. Where we were most successful was going to schools, charging them, going into their gymnasiums, going to even that we went to daycare centers, and some daycare centers allowed us to set up on their parking lots, and the kids would just come out and volley, and they'd be too small sometimes. We could get them to follow along, but they'd have a blast just trying to get it over the net and running around in a circle to get back in line for their next shot. And so we had programs depending on the different age groups. And more and more the way we made it accessible, more and more the customer base became either a mixed race place or even a highly minority, whether it's Black or brown kind of base, because we finally made something like this accessible to them. So they were pumped up. We did after school programs in the inner city and come set up on the gymnasium and the volleyball court kind of thing, but at least teaching them how to control the ball and hit it within a certain area and things of that nature.
All right. Hop on back to the story, because I just needed to get a few things squared away in my mind. Back to the story.
So staying with tennis for a little while, I eventually, so here's a little side story that's fun. I'm getting ready for surgery. And like I said, I had to beg my surgeon to operate. Are you sure you want to do this? Anytime you go in, I'm like, look, man, I've been in this bulletproof vest for about 6 months, and it's not working. And so Topher and I would go out, and being in school, and we pretend he's 6'4", he's broad guy, and we pretend like I was his bodyguard, and maybe he played for the Rams or something like that wherever we would go. And he would go, "There's my bodyguard," and he'd tap on my chest, and they go, "Oh." It was quite funny, the reactions we would get.
Nice.
But when you're preparing for surgery, you have to give blood so that you have a certain amount of blood on, in case you lose a lot of blood, you can replenish it with your own blood. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm smoking and drinking at the time, not heavily drinking, but my very first time, it's Monday Night Football, and I give blood on Monday. First thing they tell you, don't smoke or drink. After you've given blood, give yourself a little time for everything to kind of replenish. Well, you get around Monday Night Football, and you're excited, and you're talking trash, and in somebody's apartment that and you know it's a bunch of guys around, and before you know it, you forgot, oh, I gave blood earlier today. So I'm smoking and I'm drinking, and I stand up and I go, ooh, and I sit back down, and then I lean over and I unstrap my back brace underneath my clothes, and I'm like, and Topher sees me and he goes, uh-oh, we need to get you outside. And so we start to go outside, and I'm like, hold on. And I'm bending over, and he's like, let's get you to fresh air. So we were already on the first floor of this apartment complex. And we get outside of the apartment complex, and I go, hold on. And next thing I know, I don't recall anything, but he says my head hit the wall like this on the way down.
Oh, JD.
And so all I remember is waking up to Topher yelling at me, if you don't get your punk ass up right now, I am not telling Larry and Joan that you died on my effing watch. Get your ass up right now. And so he is screaming at me, and they come, and the only thing cold that they have to offer me is a cold brew to put on my head to kind of to lessen and kind of get me back to functioning and everything.
Oh,
right.
Goodness.
And so I'm sitting outside this apartment complex, and it's a nice size apartment complex, and the major street of Olive is right there. And this is in the predominantly Black part of town. And I'm just sitting there like this. And they said I was laid out for about 5 to 10 minutes. So eventually I get up, I get my druthers together, and I go drive Topher home and go home. I recall, yep, I need to pay attention when I give blood. Monday Night Football, not a good mix, but at least not to do that.
Hilarious.
So I go through the surgery. I go through the rehab, and I can remember, and this has been a lesson for me for all of my entrepreneurial ways, all of my struggles ever since. The first week I get home, I cannot walk to my next door neighbors without the assistance of my dad to be there to help me get back into the house and sit on the couch. Mm-hmm. And so I'm really bedstricken for quite some time, but every day I'm trying to walk a little bit further. And, by the end of the first week, I'm able to walk all the way to the end of the block, and then come back. And then this was October when the surgery happened in 96. And by the end of by the end of the winter, I'm walking through the winter, hoodie on, everything else, but I'm power walking 3 to 5 miles every day. And that became like a good exercise for me. But it also became like, JD, you can be patient and just deal with where you are at this moment. Of course, you want to be in different places in your life. Of course, I want Race for What to be somewhere different. And I want to be speaking at colleges, like, of course, same difference. We want to be, as popular as All the Smoke and all of these different things. We're going to get there. We need to recognize we're just able to walk this far right now, right. Come back and keep pushing forward and watch the growth and development of it. So that became a good life lesson for me.
What exactly did they do during the surgery? And then the second thing is, do you still play tennis?
I play in memory. They took a piece of my hip bone and fused it into the bone that was not connecting. So your spine, as it grows, as you're a child, it grows and it connects around your spinal column, and then it connects to the bone above it. And mine didn't connect. So I had a gap, and in that gap, I missed connecting to the bone above it. So that's why I was able to slide. And it was the L4, L5 lower back. So they took a piece of the hip bone and put it into there. And they got a nice little metal device, which I've always wondered, is it ever going to rust inside my body? But there's 2 long screws in one of the vertebrae and 2 long screws in the other, and a hinge like piece that keeps them that goes, so it's acting as, you know, a flexible hinge to keep them in place.
So,
and I've had this since 96.
are you flexible?
I've never been flexible, but I'm the same unflexible as I was before the surgery. And so I went back and I would have made the tennis team had I kept going. By this time, my coach had quit, and the player that was number 1 at the time was, at the time I first got there, he came and continued on from grad school, and he was our new coach. He was from Turkey, and boy, Salem, I think was his name. Yeah, Salem. And Salem and I got along great. When I first saw him playing, if he was not doing well, he would go off, but in Turkish, right? So nobody would know what he's saying. So meanwhile, he's saying all these horrible things about the opponent and their family. And then the coaches on the other side go, he can't do that. And they go, well, no, he just, you know, he's like telling himself he needs to get it in gear.
Nice.
But Salem and I were we were having practice indoors at this very nice, wealthy area, indoor racket club. And they had, 20 courts and a nice little, dining area and all of that. And I would tell Salem, like, dude, I need your help. Like, you're going to have to talk to me like a football player. You cannot talk to me like a tennis player. I can't be told, do these things. I got to be told, get your fat ass moving. If you don't get your ass together, you're going to be in this, that, and the other. Move it. And so you got to tell me I'm lazy. Call me all kind of names, do whatever you got to do to motivate me, but you got to do it like I'm a football player. And so within that, Salem almost got us kicked out of this racket club because these little old ladies at the end of the court were like, oh my God, he's such an abusive coach. We do not want to do that. And I had to go apologize to them and say, hey, it won't happen again. I asked him to do that for me. So.
Wow. Are you still friends with Cam Thomas?
We're friendly in speaking. I mean, he was a little hurt by the fact that I ended up choosing to quit, and we hadn't maintained that relationship. I saw him right after I wrote my book, and his daughter is doing great work. She's got a great following on Instagram. And what's it called when you cross intersectional environmentalist?
Oh,
and
wow.
That's her title. And she's talking about environmental issues, but it's specifically as they relate to the harm to Black and brown folks. Because typically, as in anything, when something goes bad, it goes worse. It goes worse for them than, it does for us.
I got you. Wow. I'm fascinated by the effort that went into that. Are there efforts in St. Louis to maintain, or is anybody filling that gap, teaching people in urban areas tennis and those kinds of games?
I would have to check. For a while, one of my close friends and his father, he was much younger than us, but he was at St. Louis Tennis Phenom. They were doing that. They had taken on the same business model and taken up where we dropped off. He was in a major car accident, a young guy, and has been not paralyzed, but brain damaged quite significantly.
Oh, wow.
And so they don't do that anymore. And since then, the father was now much older, but he was involved in the community. The father was, and his family were, from all being aldermen and city councilmen. I mean, well, and community leaders for quite some time. And now the sister of the one that had the accident is one of the alder persons of St. Louis. So their family had taken it up for a while. I don't know right now what that's like. I need to get back and kind of figure that out. But yeah.
Is it your observation, and maybe I'm just seeing this, but when we look at mainstream sports, baseball has an initiative to move back into urban areas so that they can get young African Americans and Latinos involved in baseball. There's some efforts to bring that kind of education, that kind of sports education through hockey into urban centers. Uh, Tennis, the same sorts of thing. Golf, we saw that with Tiger Woods. Again, not agitating in terms of this is always a race thing, but is it a race thing? Is it an economics thing? Is it a class thing?
Well, those things tie in, because until you repair the harm, then those definitely, as we talked about before, tie into each other, right? We used racism to separate economically and then now we use economic reasons to exclude and include, and so that definitely is a thing. I think that's why the NBA is so talented right now, because it baseball started to turn away from a lot of the urban involvement, and Black folks became less and less involved in baseball, and they moved down to more of the Latino and or Latinx group, and started going heavily into those communities, which are still Black and brown folks. But they got away from the American Black experience quite a bit.
You mean like in Latin America and Cuba and all those
Yeah,
countries?
Dominican,
Yeah.
yeah, Puerto Rico, all of that. But they got away from the domestic approach to in making it more inclusive for Black and easier for Black folks to be a part of it. And that was a decision, a strategic decision that they made back in the 80s and 90s, right?
Right.
And at the same time, football was becoming more and more known for its danger, and parents didn't want football as much. And the way that they care for people, and if you go and look at the most recent settlement in the NFL, they gave more money to white folks who had head traumas than Black folks, because they said white folks were more intelligent and therefore Black folks' trauma. And this is documented, so this is brand new still. So anybody that is uncomfortable with this, go look it up. I forgot what they called it, race something, but basically that's what they came up with, that we'll give more money to the white folks because if they're having brain trauma issues, they were at a higher level of intelligence than the Black folks, so we'll give less money to Black folks because you were already stupid. You just because now you have brain trauma doesn't mean that you lost much, and they're measuring it according to the damages, right? So when you start to see that, and then the NBA still, of course, you got ownership and you got a level of exclusion based on the prices of who can come to the games and all of that. And, but the NBA is saying, we're embracing this. We're embracing our players. We're embracing Black Lives Matter. Sure, they could do more. And sometimes it looks like, it's just for show. But at the same time, there's this still welcoming, and there's still the talent pool is more and more focused on what can I do in basketball. I've been saying this for quite some time. Soccer wants to grow in the United States. They have a great opportunity to come in and swoop up what baseball and football are putting down.
I would say that soccer would have to recalibrate their systems, and the NFL is going to get theirs. But the reason why I think the NFL is going to get theirs is because, we talked about representation, and the Super Bowl was just last Sunday, right? You saw Patrick Mahomes do his work. How did you feel about that? And then we can flip, and you can tell me, we can talk about that as well.
I like the fact that Patrick Mahomes is doing so well. I like the fact that Jalen Hurst is doing so well, and that, Lamar Jackson, is my favorite player, even though I barely know anybody in the NFL anymore because of the overt racism and just lack of humanity in the NFL. It kind of just pushed me away at a time when I was deciding which one sport I wanted to watch. But I'm happy to see this because I was happy when Doug Williams won. And yes, I was happy because he was a Black quarterback. Not that I love I love Kurt Warner. I love some of the great, I know we've talked about this issue, but I love Dan Marino. I was a huge John Elway fan. So it wasn't just about race, but it was about equality of opportunity and everything else. And so I like that it's going that way. It's has to, though, right? It's not a welcoming thing. It's a damn, we better. So it's a different approach to me.
I agree. The tea leaves to me were such that it resembles the bellwether moment, sports fans, between when USC played Alabama in 1971 at Legion Field in Birmingham. And that was 8 years after the bombing at 16th Street Baptist Church, right? So Legion Field is within blocks of that atrocity. But the SEC, Southeastern Conference, was barely, this is 1971, this is within my lifetime, it was just beginning to desegregate. Bear Bryant had one black redshirt freshman, and in those days, my gosh, I'm sounding old. In those days, freshmen didn't play. You redshirted, and then you played 3 years on varsity. They played USC, and that was John McKay's Southern California Trojans. They had an all-black backfield, which meant they had a black quarterback, they had a black halfback, and a black fullback. Sam Cunningham, Randall Cunningham's older brother, also known as Sam Bam Cunningham, ran all over Alabama. You could see the tea leaves. If you wanted to read the tea leaves, they said, in order for us to be competitive in the new world, we have to have black athletes. Now, you cannot, if you've been alive in the last 20 years, you could not conceive of the Southeastern Conference not having black athletes. Couldn't conceive it. So when Patrick Mahomes wins his third Super Bowl in 4 appearances, this is definitely crushing the idea that blacks are not intelligent enough to play quarterback, 1. 2, he was the first black quarterback to win back-to-back Super Bowls. And now, not only do you see it trickling down, so we're looking for good black quarterbacks. And again, this is meritocracy. It's right. Or to the degree that meritocracy exists, you're finding that you simply can't have a bad quarterback of any race, you need to have a good quarterback. And if that quarterback happens to be black, well, more power to you. And if it happens to be white, that's another thing. That's good for you too. But we're starting to see less emphasis, or you're seeing more of an emphasis on competence. I watch Joe Burrow and I'm amazed at some of the throws that he makes.
I think Joe Burrow, and I just finally looked at Josh Allen, and the boys can ball.
Right. Absolutely.
Flat out. And I like Matthew Stafford and Goff. Hey, stand in the pocket and take that and make the decision and throw that precise ball, lead the players the way you need to lead them. I like it.
And now, because of that, or maybe, I don't know whether it's top down, but you're seeing more black quarterbacks evolve through college, and where they would normally have been, if you were a black quarterback in high school, you might very well have been diverted to running back or tight end, possibly, or wide receiver or defensive back, maybe linebacker, but you may not have been a college level quarterback. And to me, at that point, is it intangibles or is it bias? I don't know, because I'm not in practice. But when you see this diversion of talent and this diffusion of talent elsewhere, I sometimes wonder, where did this guy go?
And I'm gonna tell you, just to flip this whole thing around, I think Tim Tebow was given a fucking raw deal. Excuse my language, but I think Tim Tebow was given a raw deal. And I get it; he might not have been as successful or as talented in the ways that they needed it, but I think that he was a winner for sure. And he proved that even in the year that he had great success in Denver, and they could have given him, he was just the type that was going to figure it out, to me. And I just think that they tried to pigeonhole him into a way. So for all of us, I'm a Tim Tebow fan. Let me just put that out there.
We may have to discuss that one some more. I'm fascinated by what we've seen, because everybody's marveling at the athletic and mental capabilities of Patrick Mahomes. So you're looking at the fact that he can throw a ball high, sidearm, low, he's pitching. And I think it was Colin Cowherd who said this. It's like the first 3 quarters, he's compiling data. Fourth quarter, it's time to act. And when you see that man go into fourth quarter mode, he is cold-blooded, analytical, ruthless, doesn't make mistakes. He's going downfield, and you're trying. You're doing everything you can to stop him. And there's this moment in the games when you realize nothing we do is going to stop this man. And watching that from the 10,000-foot view, you're thinking, they're throwing everything at him and he has an answer. Now, if I'm going to jump in terms of being proud of somebody, it's like, to everybody who said that black athletes were incapable of that kind of thought processing, there you go. Pay attention, because he's doing everything that a defensive defensive coordinator and all of the position coordinators are throwing at him, and he's beating it. And it's not that he's got a little voice in his head from somebody else telling him what to do. You don't have time for that. These are split-second decisions that he's making to dissect, and I mean dissect, a defense that are fully grown, extremely competent men bent on stopping him from doing what he's doing. And yet, he gets it done. I watch that and I go, dang, that's a bad man.
Yeah. He is. I don't watch enough to really comment on the full. Like I said, I only watched the fourth quarter of this game, so I saw him in full action. But he's definitely a bad man, and I still wish that Ravens would have won.
Oh, I understand that. I respect that. I had taken, much like you had, a hiatus from the NFL with the whole Colin Kaepernick. We are offended and upset about a man kneeling.
That was a power to define thing, though. And
right.
This is right. We talking about this more from when blacks were excluded from sports and allowed into sports. There's a great movie, Glory Road. It's certainly got that Hollywood storyline added into it, and some of the things weren't precise, but it was a great movie. And what it shows a great depiction of is Black folks weren't coming in saying, move, get out of the way, you this, that, and the other, and I'm taking this from you violently. But yet their ability to be stars and take our jobs, as we're going through right now, the focus isn't on me being the best version of myself, and it's certainly not on true meritocracy. But the moment I feel threatened by your ability to do this, now I want to act out in violence. And that's not a mature way of dealing with things. And we, as white folks, if we're going to make the change, and I see it happening, and we want racism to no longer be a topic of discussion, we have to understand, we have to ask ourselves, why are we triggered to be in this position of competition to where we want to now harm you for taking this job away from us, for being better than us in this field, right? And instead of how can I do and go be the best I can be, right? Like, I don't necessarily agree with everything Mendenhall said, but I think that was his name,
right? Rashad,
you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Like, first of all, there was white running backs better than you, buddy. So, like, you already eliminated yourself from that conversation. But I also don't think that I think that we need to analyze what is the threat. And so part of the reason I agree with you, Colin Kaepernick, and the amount that it was allowed and how he was just a pawn in this power dynamic to define. But it was also you don't let him play, but somebody goes and beats their wife and you're letting them play.
Right.
You don't let him play. You don't care about the head traumas that are happening on the field, and you're not trying to take care of former players. And like, you're making so much money off of these guys, and it just became too much for me. It wasn't worth it anymore.
If not physical violence, there is a structural violence that is imposed such that I'm going to change the rules so you cannot win because you have this automatic thing, right? You have this muscular advantage. You have this athletic advantage over me. So I'm going to level the playing field by changing the rules. Well, folks, that is the definition of a structural racism, right? So let's jump back to Kaepernick. It was the most benign of protests that you could have. It is benign. It's not in your face. There's not screaming. There's not yelling. And to tell you how this is ill-defined, when a player gets injured on either team, what does everybody do? They get down on one knee because it is an act of submission. We are all at the same height with one knee down because we are kneeling. It is an act of submission. When somebody gets knighted, they kneel before something greater than themselves to be honored. When Damar Hamlin collapses on that Monday night game in Buffalo, everybody took a knee. And this becomes a problem when Kaepernick does it, protesting the national anthem. Now, quickly, and I'm going to say this one, and then I'll open it up to you. People say, I don't want politics in my sports. They are inextricably linked. If you are sitting in a stadium, politics drove the location of that stadium. Politics drove the tax abatement that allowed the community and the private owners of the team to build their politics dictated everything about that. And to say, I don't want politics in that, you mean to tell me when the planes fly overhead, that's not politics?
The standing of the playing of the national anthem is politics. Stop it.
Exactly.
It drives me nuts, and it's driven me nuts since I was a kid. Well before Colin Kaepernick did this, I was never standing it. And it wasn't about race or all of that, although maybe it was also about that for me. But my grandfather would be embarrassed. He would take me to the football games. This was when St. Louis Cardinals were playing football. And he'd go, stand up. And I go, why? What are we doing? What's this? Okay. I'm 7, 8, 10, 12, whatever years old. I don't agree with what are we doing? Why does this have to be in front of I agree with the people. Let's get politics out of this. Why does this have to be in front of our sporting event? What are we promoting this for? We're not making this a better place. We're trying to claim it as a better place. And you can't tell me any different. Well, how are we so great if we can't even have that conversation? So right. Standing, you don't like it here, go somewhere. No, that's not how this works. That's childish.
Thank you.
That's that's the spoiled brat way of doing things. And stop. We need to have conversations and continue the dialogue. But a close friend of mine took me to a baseball game in Miami. And this close friend of mine is a libertarian, as he describes himself. And when he took me, let me just say, I'm still saying close friend, and he still says close friend. He took me to my first hockey game, right? It was the Florida Panthers played in the playoffs. I mean, they went far, right? And this was in the conference finals, my very first hockey game I've ever been to. I am so grateful to John for doing this for me. I stood there. I was not going to sit down with all of them crazy drunk white folks around me. So I stood there. It was the first time it burned me up. I just like, JD, this your first time out with him, first family. I couldn't. Second time when we went to the baseball game, I didn't know a hockey crowd and how they would react. So I did, for my own protection, decide to stand there. But I wasn't happy about that. And when I sat at the baseball game, he told a mutual friend that he was hurt by it, but he knew that I was doing it for a BLM standpoint. Now, you never asked me why I was doing it, but he said that he knows close friends that he grew up with that died fighting for our freedoms. To me, and he knows we've had great in-depth conversations about how the CIA and armed forces are involved in the drug trade and allow and know what's going in and have it's political on that standpoint, how these big corporate entities are trying to control us and it's, God versus devil kind of things and all of these different things. If you know that our armed forces are not protecting our freedoms, they're protecting the large corporate interests, and really study and learn how that is being done on a geopolitical standpoint. Yes. Your friends died representing something that they weren't even representing, that we're being lied to about. How is it that I'm wrong for sitting? Why are you standing and supporting that when your friends died for that? That's my kind of position. Why can't we ask for change? And why are we publicizing this national anthem before sporting events? Like that is something that's some way of saying this is us feeling close to our nation. No, let's just go have a good time. Let's not make this all about politics.
Right. I have a complicated relationship with that sort of patriotism. There is the fear of standing out, because a lot of times I'm one of a handful of Black people attending some of these events.
Right.
And I know if I'm surrounded by white people who are drunk who
Yeah.
may not have the same perspective of patriotism as I do, I may be putting myself in a physically dangerous situation. And that's a numbers game. Me versus 16 cats, I don't like those odds. So I may stand.
Without a doubt. I get it. That's why I
Emotionally,
stood at Florida.
emotionally, I can get wrapped up in the pomp and circumstances, but there's also a mental aspect that says, I'm not buying all of this. The idea that we cannot protest, or someone may want to relegate, you can have your protest, but don't inconvenience me. That's not the nature of what protest is or does, correct?
Right.
Protest is supposed to make you uncomfortable enough to act. There can be no motion without emotion. We have to be emotionally charged to make any sort of change. And the triggered, emotionally triggered by a benign act like kneeling, Kaepernick got all manner of grief. And even if he was wearing socks that had pig on them, and that is an allusion to a police presence. Even if he showed up with a Che Guevara shirt, that is his right to have free expression in the United States. And now here we are, struggling and fighting, and for the man to have lost a career. Now, I don't care if I don't care that people would say, oh, statistically, he wasn't that great. Dude had San Francisco in the Super Bowl and in the playoffs a year or two prior. You mean to tell me that there are 32 starting quarterbacks or 31 starting quarterbacks who are decidedly better, and then even let's go so far as to say there were 32 second string quarterbacks who were decidedly better than he was? I'm not buying that argument. I believe he got blackballed because he protested.
Of course he did. And they needed to make an example out of him because they didn't do the same to everybody that protested. This was a lynching. This was what this was. It was a public lynching. Let me show you. Because if you listen to him speak on it, he speaks with intelligence, he speaks with passion, but he doesn't speak emotionally like he is told about himself. He responds in a way, well, maybe you don't know people that have been through these things. Maybe you've never been impacted this same way. And uplifting folks. And yes, of course, he's not going to the media and speaking when we want him to. He doesn't owe us that. So we can extend this for another hour and a half on these type of topics, and we will get to them as we go. I appreciate you and this platform and how it's growing. We're still going to keep telling our stories, and we're going to keep talking about real issues, because at the end of the day, Kory and I aren't trying to beat anybody else down. We're trying to just have a discussion that allows us to push through the discomfort into the place of healing.
That's true. This is all raw and unscripted. We do not schedule anything other than what are we going to talk about today? And that's 5 minutes before we go live.
I was going to say 45 seconds, but go ahead. 5 minutes. That's gracious. I'm not that much of a planner.
And this is what happens when you listen to understand as opposed to listen to respond.
Yes.
We are getting to know each other at the same time you are getting to know us. And as people say, I love these conversations because these are the conversations I would have at the corner tap with some guys over peanuts, beer, and wings. And that's a high compliment as far as I'm concerned.
It is. And you're going to give Tim Tebow his flowers at some point in this journey.
Oh, my goodness. We'll see what happens in the next episode.
Thank you, my friend. And thank you, all of you who are participating and listening and keeping us going.
For the good Dr. J.D. Mass, I am Kory May, and we'll see you next week.
Yes. Thank you for tuning in to another inspiring episode of Same Difference. We hope this journey through unique connections and diverse perspectives has left you with fresh insights and a broader understanding of the world we share.
We're humbled by your support and enthusiasm for the incredible stories and discussions we've shared. And remember, our mission is to foster critical thinking, embrace new perspectives, and spark conversations that bring us closer to an equitable world.
So, if you've enjoyed our podcast, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us. Your feedback means the world to us, and it helps us reach even more listeners.
And if you have a story to share or a topic you'd like us to explore, don't hesitate to get in touch. We're always looking for new voices and fresh perspectives to feature on Same Difference.
Until next time, remember that our shared humanity is our most powerful asset, and by working together, we can bring about positive change.
Stay curious, stay compassionate, and keep making a difference. Thank you for being a part of Same Difference.
Take care, everyone. See you in the next episode.